I'm just checking the squash. You can see this one is not quite ready yet. The stem still has some orange on it, but it is actually starting to die off. My best guess on that is within the next week or two, it will certainly be during the month of September, these red curry squash will be ready to harvest. In fact, the ones that are on the ground, you can see they're a little bit more advanced. You can't quite see so much orange on the stem. So it does rather look like Mrs. W. We're going to get a nice little haul of curry squash.
Lovely.
Now in today's programme, we should be looking at the soft fruit. Also, Mrs. W. will be busy in the kitchen preparing something using our soft fruit. They can use to eat, but also apparently medicinal purposes. Hello and welcome back to the Newdig Norfolk Gardener. Now, I get quite a few comments over the year about soft fruit. Soft fruit is really good for you, and it's a way of getting nice fresh fruit that you can enjoy for most of the year. Just in the same way that we succession sow and transplant our vegetables by planting different types of soft fruit and varieties that harvest at slightly different times of the year, you can be eating your soft fruit from June all the way through until October fresh. But if you've got the space to get enough plants, and you don't need a huge amount, surprisingly you don't need acres of land to be able to grow lots of fruit. But if you can grow a few, you've got plenty to freeze as well. So I thought, as actually one of our most popular videos on our channel is how to prune summer fruiting raspberries, fast approaching 8,000 views. But take a look at our year in the garden with our soft fruit. We start with the gooseberry for our soft fruit year. As you can see, Mrs. W has been using the stems to train her gourds up. They look lovely, don't they?
They do, yeah. Very autumnal.
Now, gooseberries are one of the first fruits that will set their flowers. So you do have to be a bit careful with them if you are pruned to late frosts. So if your last average frost date is not until May, you would need to cover those flowers so that the frost doesn't destroy them. We don't have that problem here. Our last average frost date is mid-April. These usually start to flower in April, don't they, Mrs. W?
They do, yeah.
And then the fruits will form and swell, and you just need to wait until they've sweetened a little bit, and you can usually tell when they're ready because they just give just that little bit. They're no longer taut. And of course, if you try one too early, you certainly will know that it's not ready.
Very true.
Now, gooseberries can be used in all sorts of ways. For starters, they freeze very well, and you can use them all through the year. You can make juice with them. You can make some lovely fruit wines with them. By the way, that reminds me, we do have a video coming out a bit later on in the year of fruit wines that we've made.
Yes.
And of course, you can use them in pies and crumbles, a really versatile fruit. They mix very well with some of the other soft fruit that we grow too, just to give that balance between tartness and sweetness. Aside from raspberries, which we'll be looking at a bit later, strawberries are one of the most prolific fruiting plants that you can grow. They're really easy to grow, and if you remember earlier this year, I planted some up in hanging baskets, which you can see here.
in amongst the
The tomatoes.
tomatoes.
And actually, we're getting a second flush. Mrs. W, look.
I know, we are. There's some flowers on this one. Yeah, little fruits there. Look at those. Rosie will be very pleased when she sees those. They're her favourites.
Won't she just? And of course, the idea of that was to get a slightly earlier harvest, which we did. We were eating strawberries this year from April onwards. And then we have our outdoor bed, which gives us strawberries just that bit later. You can see even these have flowers on them. In fact, there's strawberries down here, Mrs. W.
Is there? Yes.
There's a lovely large
Yeah.
one there.
Look at that one. Fantastic.
And it's the main reason really why at the moment I've been reluctant to cut these down, because they are still flowering and giving us strawberries. And actually it's quite amazing, Mrs. W, because we started eating strawberries in April and we're still eating strawberries in September.
We are, yes. Very lucky.
What a season. Now, these don't take a huge lot of maintenance. You just cut them back each year and you replace them every 3 years. After 3 years, the yield starts to go down. And these plants are so wonderful that what they'll do is they'll throw out these runners and give you free plants to replenish your strawberry bed. Next for us in our new Dig Norfolk garden comes the black currant. And you can see that it's already sending out what will be fruit for next year.
Fresh stems.
Yes. We actually have 2 black currant bushes. I'd like to add a third at some point. Black currants are really, really lovely. They're great made into a nice cordial, and they make really, really great jams. Now, like all soft fruit, they do actually like and prefer to be in full sun, but sheltered. However, they will take some shade. And most of us will have space in our garden somewhere where we can put the odd bush. They can even be grown in a flower border or a shrub border. They'll quite happily grow away there, and their flowers look really pretty, especially the time of year when your bedding plants and things are not quite out yet, because these flower in April and May. So they give you something really interesting to look at. And then a little bit later on, after midsummer, that's when they're ready to harvest, and you get the reward of some lovely fruit to be able to use. Next in our No Dig Norfolk garden, it's a race between the red currants and the summer fruiting raspberries. Usually it's the red currant first. It very much depends on what type of spring we have. This year, for instance, as you know, it was extremely wet and we didn't see a huge amount of sunshine. So we didn't actually harvest these, I think, till July, did we?
It was
this year?
July, yes.
Yeah.
It was July this year, quite a bit late.
So they were just that little bit later. And weather does play its part. Now, of course, red currants, they're great for making jelly. Especially Mrs. W's red currant jelly that we use in cooking. But also they are somewhat higher in pectin than other soft fruits. So Mrs. W tells me. So if you are having a bit of a problem maybe with some of your strawberries or your raspberry jam setting, just mix a few of those in with them and that will up the pectin to help the jam set. Raspberries are one of the most reliable soft fruit that you can grow. And we have summer fruiting raspberries, we also have autumn fruiting raspberries. And there are just 10 plants of each. And with a little bit of investment, i.e. some posts at either end and then some wires running across with a tensioner at the end that you can just keep the wire taut, you'll be rewarded with such a bounty of soft fruit. Raspberries don't need a huge amount of care. Once they're in the ground, just once a year, you need to prune them, and once a year, usually just as we start to tip into spring, so March time, give them a good mulch of either your homemade compost. In fact, this year we used some well-rotted horse manure, and boy have we been rewarded, haven't we, Mrs.
We certainly
W?
have. We've had a fantastic harvest on these.
We've got so many of these in the freezer, but so many have been eaten fresh, and especially for our 3 lovely grandchildren. In fact, now Rosie can walk. Even she toddles up here and takes them off the bush.
She does.
None of them need asking to do it. They just naturally come up here and take those lovely raspberries off. You can see these are still going. That's exactly what I would expect. We've got some yellow ones towards the end. They're really in their prime now and giving us lots of yellow raspberries. Of course, raspberries are great for making jam. Makes wonderful jam. And actually all of the soft fruits that we are looking at today, once you get 1 or 2 together, and if you do what Mrs. W does, which is to bag them up and get them in the freezer, you can bring them out at any time, mix them together, and she makes an amazing summer pudding.
Oh yes.
Last in our new dig Norfolk garden to fruit and be ready for a harvest are our blackberries. Now, I deliberately went for a thornless variety here. You don't have to. But I am a bit prissy when it comes to things like that. And I generally ensure that I'm not around when the gooseberries, which are very thorny, are ready to harvest.
That's so true. That always gets left to me to harvest the gooseberries.
I am not silly. Now I need a few of these today because, as we said earlier, Mrs. W needs a few to do a bit of work down in the new dig Norfolk gardener's kitchen. Now this is just one plant, and you can see we have many blackberries. And again, like all the other soft fruit, they don't take an awful lot of looking after. Just give them a prune once a year, feed them in spring, and you'll be rewarded with a crop like this. And one thing I would say, whether it's blackberries, raspberries, whatever, always try and harvest your soft fruits once they're dry. If it's rained, leave them to dry, because that will only promote them to rot earlier, because you're going to put them into storage wet. Also, try to pick them at their optimum. I'm trying to find one, Mrs. It's this one. So this one is quite squidgy.
Very juicy.
Yeah. Whereas this one, it has no give in it whatsoever. So long as it comes away from the bush okay, it's ready for you to eat. Another top tip that I got from Mrs. W is when you are harvesting your soft fruit, try to only layer them 2 to 3 deep, because then you won't crush the fruit that's on the bottom. So if you've got an abundance like we have, then ensure you have 2 or 3 containers so that you can do that.
Today I'm going to be showing you how I make a blackberry vinegar. And a blackberry vinegar it's quite a simple thing to make, but it's so versatile. You can use it for salad dressings, you can drizzle it over Yorkshire puddings or pancakes as an alternative dessert. It's really nice drizzled over roasted root vegetables too. And it's also an old-fashioned remedy for the winter cough and cold. And you would dilute that 1 part vinegar to 5 parts hot water and drink that daily. Should help with any coughs and colds you get. So I actually started this off 10 days ago. So to the 600 grams of blackberries that I'd picked, I added 600 mils of white wine or cider vinegar. I used white wine vinegar, but you can use either. So these have been steeping and I have been stirring them daily. So what I'm going to do now is to strain them either through a fine sieve or a muslin cloth. I've actually got a jelly bag that I use for my jams and wines and things. And you can see how, compared to the fresh blackberries that we've just picked, how much of the colour has actually come out into the vinegar. These are quite red now compared to the blackberries. Right, so we're just going to let that strain through for about 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure. You don't want to squeeze it as such because you don't want it to become cloudy, but just for the optimum amount of vinegar and juice to come out. So we'll leave that for 10 minutes. It's now given me 700 mils of juice, hand vinegar. So to this you need to add 2/3 sugar to vinegar, which is an easy calculation. You just simply divide by 3 and times by 2. So in this case we've got 466 grams of sugar. So you put that in the saucepan. Add the sugar. So you stir together the sugar and vinegar and you just gently heat it until the sugar dissolves. And after a couple of minutes you'll notice the difference in the sound as you're stirring it. The sugar will be dissolved and it will be a much less grainy feel to the saucepan. I'm now going to turn it up and we now need to bring it to a boil before we're going to turn it down and simmer for 10 minutes. So I've brought this to the boil and just turned it down now to a gentle simmer for 10 minutes. So that's had a good 10 minutes simmering now and it's just slightly thickened it. And all I'm going to do now is switch this off and leave that just to cool down for probably 5-10 minutes before we decant it into the sterilised bottles. So this has been cooling now for a few minutes and it's made nearly a litre, over 900 mils anyway. So I've got some sterilised bottles here. I'm simply now going to just decant this into there. I think I better just have a little test of this. Oh, that's lovely. It's very sweet yet sour. Oh, I do like slightly sour taste and things.
So you won't be getting a cold during the rest of September, Mrs. W?
No, I don't think I will. I hope not anyway. You don't have to use it as a medicinal thing. It makes a really lovely salad dressing. It's quite similar to a balsamic vinegar in as much as it's a little bit thicker, it's definitely sweeter and fruitier as well. So nice. Give it a go, everybody.
The last thing just to talk about, which we didn't do as we were going around, is that we also have blueberries. Blueberries require a slightly acidic soil. Now we're quite lucky here because our soil is more on the acidic side than it is the alkaline. It's not at the extreme, but it is just slightly more on the acidic side than alkaline. So we can actually grow ours in the ground. And Mrs. W actually feeds them with an ericaceous feed, don't you?
Yeah.
Just so that the soil around it is kept on that acid side. And they do very well for us. But they also do very well in containers. So if your soil is alkaline, you can just buy some ericaceous compost, plant them into that. Do, in that case, make sure you water them don't let them dry out because they can't fend for themselves. Their roots can't get out into the ground. Blueberries, again, an absolutely amazing fruit. They freeze well. Blueberry juice is very nice, but you would need a few plants to be able to get enough for a couple of glasses each. However, one of my most favourite things that Mrs. W makes for me while they are in harvest are her blueberry muffins. I do like a blueberry muffin with a cup of coffee. So that's how we sustain ourselves in fruit. Clearly not everything is in harvest all of the time, and a lot of people go to your local stores, your supermarkets, because they're there. They will be coming from all around the world. Eating things that are in season is so much better. And actually, if you pick them at the right time, they will freeze. You can bring them out and use them in your desserts, however you wish to use them at any time of the year. And I guarantee you they will still pack a punch more than those store-bought fruit. Do let us know in the comments, what do you grow? Do you container grow your fruit? Do you grow them in the ground? Do you grow them in borders? Is it something that maybe you don't do, but you're thinking about? Think about those spaces you've got where very little grows. The chances are a soft fruit bush will, and you will be able to enjoy your own fresh fruit. Whatever you're doing, do have a great gardening week. And myself and Mrs. W, we shall see you again on the next one.